have dedicated teams to renew and strengthen financial controls and project oversight. New governance is in place to oversee approvals of all contracts over $40,000.
We've reduced our consulting footprint. At the start of the fiscal year, we had 25 fewer consultants than at the same time last year, and today we have 68 fewer consultants working in the CBSA in the IT branches than we did when I was here in February. We're undertaking this reduction carefully and with purpose, making sure that we transfer knowledge and skills to our internal teams as we go. Nous devons toutefois continuer à compter.
We do need to continue to rely on outside experience, in addition to the CBSA's processes to validate the qualifications of contract resources. Individuals working with CBSA on contract must also attest to their credentials and expertise to support ongoing assessments taxpayers are getting value for money.
We will also be requiring vendors with active IT service contracts to certify that none of the resources they provide to CBSA is actively employed as public servants who have not disclosed this information. Should it be discovered that this is not the case after they have certified, we will terminate the resource and likely the contract. All CBSA employees will have to validate their conflict of interest declarations and will renew these declarations on a recurring basis. In addition, all employees involved in procurement will be required to certify that they do not have conflicts of interest, real, apparent, or perceived, relating to individual procurements at the outset of each process. La réalité est que nous ne...
It is a reality that we cannot have documentation for every scenario. That's why I am in a world of trusting but verifying. But I want to be clear. My working assumption is that as public servants, we abide by the rules of our workplace, which is why our code of conduct is so important.
On May 6th, the CBSA published a refreshed code of conduct for employees at the CBSA. It's been updated to reflect current scenarios, more inclusive language so that all employees can see themselves in the code. What hasn't changed are the fundamentals of the code: respect, integrity, stewardship, and the pursuit of excellence. What also continues to guide us is the important mandate the CBSA has to serve and protect Canadians, and the professionalism and dedication with which CBSA employees deliver on this mandate every day across the country and around the world. Merci.
Thank you very much. We'll now begin our first round of questioning. Mr. Barrett, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Mr. John Osowski is the former president of the CBSA, is that correct? Did CBSA enter into a paid contract with Mr. Osowski surrounding his testimony on ArriveCan?
So, in the federal government, when former public servants are called to testify before commissions of inquiry, in litigation, before the PSLRAB, or perhaps at parliamentary committees, it's not uncommon for them to be brought back on a casual contract to facilitate their access to the information and the support they need to prepare themselves to testify on behalf of the Crown. So I brought him in on a casual contract to facilitate his access to the information that he sought to prepare. That's the convention that I was working under when I made that arrangement. If it turns out that that was not required for him to access the information that he needed, I'll take responsibility for that.
So Mr. Osowski left the public service and now works for a big consulting firm. Is that right?
I don't know that he still works there, but I do know that he was working with a consulting firm.
Does PricewaterhouseCoopers, the firm that he was working at the time that you brought him on contract to get aligned before he testified at committee, were they doing any business with the CBSA, his firm?
They weren't doing any business. I'm not sure I understand the comment about get aligned. He did ask for access to documents that he had had when he was in the position of president to
We'll circle back to that, ma'am. We'll circle back to that. The question is, does PricewaterhouseCoopers have any contracts with the Canada Border Service Agency?
No.
Do they have any contracts with the Government of Canada?
I presume so. I don't know. I know what is happening in the CBSA.
How much was Mr. Osowski paid?
I believe he billed 1 day for his preparation for testimony, and that was approximately $500.
So he billed, so he set the terms of the contract, the price for it?
No, he was brought in at a certain level. I believe it was an EX1 level, but I'd have to confirm that. And then he signed a letter of offer that included conflict of interest declaration, and that would be the mechanism by which we would facilitate his access.
What documents did he have access to?
You'll have to ask him. I believe he's appearing on
Well, I'm
Thursday.
asking you, actually. You're the president of the Canada Border Services Agency. You brought in someone who works for a consulting shop, who does consulting with the Government of Canada, and you wrote them a check, and you wanted to get back to this. I'm very interested in who he met with, so I'm not going to ask Mr. Osowski, I'm going to ask you who he met with and what he saw, because this is really important. Because what it looks like to me is that we have a former executive who's involved in a massive scandal, a $60 million scandal, with a department that has investigations that include the RCMP kicking people's front doors in. So I think it's pretty interesting that he's getting paid by his former employer. It looks to me like he was getting paid to get his story straight. So who did he meet with, and what documents did he see? And I'm asking you, not Mr. Osowski.
Mr. Chair, I don't understand the insinuation about getting stories straight. As I just said, it was to access information that he wanted to review in order to prepare to come and answer the questions of this committee. So I'm not aware that he met with anybody other than the person that was obtaining those documents for him. They were not new documents. They were documents that existed when he was the president.
Did any of them require a security clearance?
We validated that he has a security clearance. I don't believe any of the documents were classified, but again, I didn't review the documents that he accessed, but I can say that the documents
Who would have done that due diligence to verify that he ought to be seeing the documents that he be seeing?
They were
that he saw?
documents that existed when he was the president of the CBSA.
So he had access to all of the documents that existed when he was the president of the CBSA?
He had access to his emails, and then he requested specific documents to review.
Would you table a list of those specific documents that he requested access to?
Yes.
And what date did this occur?
I'll have to get back to you.
You will you get back to us?
Yes.
Okay. And there's certainty that he didn't meet with anybody?
I'm not aware that he met with anybody, but again, I think that question is best posed to him.
Was he furnished with any information, briefing materials, talking points, anything of that nature?
He wasn't furnished with any talking points. He did see material, as I have said.
What was this material? Prep material for committee?
It was documents that he wanted to review before coming to testify here.
Yeah, I get that he wanted to see them. What I'm asking is what the type of documents were. So we know that your department prepares you in advance of your committee. So to say that he wanted to see them, okay, fine. I believe it's in your collective interest that you all were aligned on what he said when he came to committee, because this is a massive scandal that your department is facing, that your agency is facing. So did he ask to see the same type of prep materials that he would have asked to see when he was the president, like the alignment on messaging that the department was using?
So there's no alignment and there's no messaging. Material, I asked for material to prepare myself. He wanted to review documents that existed when he was the president of CBSA to refresh his memory to come and testify. But again, he is coming on Thursday. I believe these questions are best put to him.
Thank you very much. That is the time. Turning to Ms. Yip, you have the floor for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for taking the time to come again to speak on behalf of CBSA. So, Ms. O'Gorman, did you learn anything new from Kristen First's testimony before the House on April 17th?
I believe I was generally aware of all of the points he made. I apologize if I'm missing something, but there was nothing specific that jumped out as particularly new information.
Okay. Has CBSA requested any funds to be repaid back to the government from GC Strategies or Coradix and Dalian?
So we are going through all of the documentation and those contracts to determine whether restitution is warranted, and I'm working closely with our colleagues in the Public Services and Procurement Department to do that work, and would rely on them to seek restitution. So certainly that is what we are looking at.
So is it that department that would lead in the effort to recoup the funds?
Have the documentation that would give rise to any questions as to whether restitution is warranted, but we would work closely with PSPC to seek that restitution.
What is CBSA doing to ensure that resumes from prospective contractors and subcontractors are not being copy and pasted from requirement rubrics?
So two things, several things, but to that specific question that you've asked, we are having potential contractors attest to the CVs that are put forward to CBSA. We are separating the review of those contracts and having it done in conjunction with our procurement group, and we've also implemented a quality assurance function that will pull those CVs and their evaluations on a regular basis to do checks on them.
What is CBSA's policy or rules regarding work-related meetings with stakeholders and prospective contractors that take place off-site?
So our code of conduct was clear about both real and perceived conflicts that arise when employees are engaging with consultants and contractors outside of the specific business at hand. That being said, we have at CBSA put in a requirement that employees are to disclose any interactions with contractors outside of a contracting process, just to make sure that's clear to everybody and that there's transparency around that.
What about gifts?
The same, the code spoke to the receipt of gifts. Employees are not to accept gifts from contractors. There's a provision in the course of diplomatic relations where some kind of gifts can be received under a certain value and over a certain value declared, but that's covered in the code of conduct.
Do you know what the values are?
I can get back to the committee on that.
Okay.
It's enumerated.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. During Mr. First's testimony on April 17th, he explained that it is regular practice for contractors to replace resources at guidance of the client all the time, depending on whether there were discrepancies with their experience, whether they were not working very well, or whether or not they needed to move on to another project. Do you agree? Is this common practice?
So I don't know whether it's common practice. I do understand that when certain resources are put on a contract and those contracts are in place for some number of years, that they will move on to other jobs or not be available at the time. I can't speak as to whether it's common practice. Certainly if consultants or contractors aren't performing, that's a separate issue, and absolutely we would seek to remove them from the contract and have somebody else. So I would see those as two different issues, but I can't speak to the frequency with which that takes place.
Okay. Did CBSA provide guidance to GC Strategies instructing them to subcontract out the work?
No.
You mentioned in your opening statement about the mandate is to serve and protect Canadians. Do you feel moving forward that this is something CBSA can continue to do? What are your thoughts given this experience?
I've never for one moment doubted CBSA's ability to serve and protect Canadians. Every day they are finding contraband. Last year they welcomed about 86 million travelers. They are welcoming and processing asylum seekers. We are working with police partners on all manner of investigations. If you're referring to the situations that have arisen with regard to contracting, lack of paperwork, we are addressing that on all fronts, but I wouldn't want to confuse the extremely important need to be beyond reproach in our contracting and our transparency with the work of serving and protecting Canadians every day.
Thank you very much. Suivant, Madame Sinclair-Desgagne.
Ms. de Gagné, you have 6 minutes. The floor is yours. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. Ms. Gorman, I'll have a couple of questions for you a bit later, but I'll start with Mr. Larapuma. Now, sir, you were involved at all stages, more or less, of the awarding of contracts by the CBSA to GC Strategies, and your name is in a lot of places. But I'd like to start with the document that the Auditor General submitted to our committee, which includes all the invitations that CBSA officials received from GC Strategies. Your name is in 4 spots, and you received emails inviting you to events in 2019 and 2021. First, could you please tell me if you attended those events in 2019 and 2021?
Mr. Chair, I did not attend any event in 2019. I did attend 2 events in 2020.
2 événements en 2020.
2 events in 2020, and what were they specifically, please?
It was one event that was related to the virtual whiskey tasting, and the other one was a event at Lansdowne Park.
Qui d'autre était de l'Agence de services frontaliers présent?
Who else from the CBSA attended those whiskey tasting events?
From my recollection, Mr. Chair, my senior managers attended those events, as well as some of my colleagues.
Pouvez-vous, s'il vous plaît, nous donner des noms?
Could you please give me names?
It was Mr. Utano and Mr. McDonald were my senior managers, and Mr. Steve Luzon attended one of the events, the whiskey tasting, and then the other attendees were consultants.
Avez-vous personnellement?
Personally, well, your superiors were at the event. Were others informed of these invitations at the CBSA? What I mean by that is, did you follow the code of conduct that you have to inform a superior when someone receives an official, a gift of some sort?
I did not specifically inform anyone. My superiors were aware that I was attending.
Pourquoi n'avez-vous informé personne?
Why didn't you inform anyone? Is it because it's a common practice at the CBSA to receive gifts like those and not inform superiors? It's a common practice, and therefore you don't need to inform your superiors of that fact?
No, Mr. Chair, I don't think it is common practice. At that time, ArriveCan was a very intense project. We were spending long hours working on ArriveCan, and I saw this as a team celebration, and I wanted to socialize with some of my teammates.
Pourtant, vous avez...
And yet, I imagine you've read your code of conduct and that officials are not entitled to accept gifts, especially not from consultants. Could you please tell me the date, ballpark, the month, for example, that the whiskey tasting took place in 2020?
Mr. Chair, I will have to get back to you on the exact date. I do not have it. And
Est-ce que vous savez à peu près c'est à quelle saison?
Ballpark? What season, for example? Spring, summer, fall?
It was in the spring, Mr. Chair.
Donc, autour du 20 avril.
So, at about the 20th of April, when a multi-million-dollar contract was awarded to GC Strategies, well, on the one hand, we have a multi-million-dollar contract that was non-competitive that was awarded to GC Strategies, and then a number of officials from CBSA, and I'm including you in that, sir, you were invited to a whiskey tasting, and no one saw fit to declare that invitation. You think that that's common practice? It's quite normal? Do you regret, first, agreeing to the invitation, and second, not informing your superiors, not only your senior manager, but the director of the agency? And that was my next question. But first, do you regret having agreed?
Mr. Chair, I made an error in judgment, and I do regret not informing my superiors as well as going to the event.
D'accord, donc vous reconnaissez que c'est une erreur de jugement.
So you acknowledge that it was an error in judgment. Now, Mr. Asuski, was he aware of what was occurring? Mr. Duan, he was aware, I imagine?
I do not know, Mr. Chair.
Vous n'avez aucune idée si M. Dohan, qui pourtant...
You don't know if Mr. Duan, who was overseeing your work, was aware of the existence of these invitations and those collegial moments between contractors and public officials.
I do not know, Mr. Chair.
D'accord.
I see. Well, I have about 30 seconds remaining. You were CC'd on an email between Mr. Yutano and Ms. Jurigan from Public Services and Procurement Canada regarding the misgivings that they raised about the awarding of non-competitive contracts over a 3-year period that Mr. Yutano had pushed for, such that GC Strategies would get those contracts in April 2020. You were CC'd in those emails. At any point in time, did you say to yourself, well, Public Services and Procurement Canada is right, this contract should not be non-competitive, that we have time to send out a solicitation, a call for tenders, and especially given that it's such a large amount of money, it's not proper to have a non-competitive process. At any point did you say to yourself, this is not right? Did you have a discussion with Mr. Yutano, or did you close your eyes to the matter?
Mr. Chair, I was not involved in the contracting processes at all within CBSA. My role was to lead the technical development of the application.
Monsieur Heller,
No,
vous êtes en copie.
désolé, madame.
Sorry to cut you off. Your time has run out.
Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being present today. I'll start with the CBSA regarding the conditions that the president, the union president of the Customs, President Mark Weber, who gave testimony to this committee and highlighted some of the key issues that are persistent within the CBSA that have led to conditions for a scandal like ArriveCan to be possible. A number of the number, he made very clear, of supervisory officers exceeded the number of border officials. So it's very management-heavy work environment, resulting in extreme workloads for those at the front lines, and of course those at the supervisory level not necessarily having to be directly supporting that work. There was a lack of consultations with the unions and the employees regards to this kind of application, the ArriveCan app. How can technology replace border officers when Canadians' data privacy and safety is involved?
So I've spoken to Mr. Weber about the concerns he's raised about the span of control, and those conversations are constructive and ongoing. And of course, we have many different workplaces and work locations and situations in the CBSA. The Toronto Pearson, many BSOs, remote ports of entry, only a couple. And so it's hard to put a number on span of control. Sometimes there are fewer people under a chief or superintendent, but just by virtue of where it's located. But I don't want to undermine his concerns, and I remain happy to have that dialogue with him. He certainly has a perspective that I'm interested in. I don't foresee technology ever replacing border service officers. The fact is, right now, people do put their information into the kiosk or through advanced declaration. What we are aiming to do, however, is free border service officers up to do the higher value work and targeting than collecting papers and keying in information. So I don't want to speak for Mr. Weber and his team, but that's where I think we can have a constructive dialogue on where we are using technology to allow people to focus on the higher threats.
No, thank you for that, Ms. O'Gorman. I think where unions, particularly public service workers, are concerned, when we've seen a pattern of this concern, particularly in the last government's scandal with the Phoenix pay system, we've seen public servants actually lose their job in favor of an application that just doesn't work. And in this case, I think it's very reasonable that the president of the customs union is concerned over the fact that there could be a more heavy reliance on this. And the Auditor General makes a point of this in Exhibit 1.2 of the audit of ArriveCan in relation to the continued heavy reliance on external resources to develop ArriveCan, particularly from the periods of April 2020 to March 2023. You can look at that report, page 7. How is it, what evidence can you suggest to public servants and those of the union that you are in fact trying to reduce the reliance on external resources, given the fact that the most recent application, ArriveCan, relied so heavily?
Thank you. I do not foresee CBSA needing fewer border service officers. The fact is, travel volumes are increasing, commercial volumes are increasing, efforts to...
But to make the apps, sorry. Just clearly on the apps. Like on technological development, there's an increase in reliance on external resources. Do you have a plan to actually begin the work to see CBSA have these kinds of public servants within the CBSA as an example of how you can rely less on external contractors? Looking at an appendix, for example, just a seconded document we asked for evidence, Appendix B, contract values for GC Strategies, Dalian, and Cordix. This is a new document since you've been present in this committee. We asked in this committee for information in relation to these three companies that have just a few or a handful of individuals within them, and it reported that since January 1st, the period that we seconded supply for, 2011, that the CBSA was one of the main external external receivers of contracts since 2011. As a matter of fact, the former company, Cordix, which helped the former government, in the CBSA in particular, took in almost $42 million worth of contracts. It doesn't seem to me like you're actually taking the work of, or undergoing the work of trying to reduce this reliance. It's been going on for over a decade now.
As I said in my opening remarks, I have actually reduced the number of contractors to the tune of 25%, and several since I appeared here last time. We have 180 systems. Most of them are legacy, and so what I don't want to do is precipitously decrease our reliance on the few people that know COBOL and then find ourselves unable to address a system problem. So we're doing it deliberately, but we're actively doing it, and our senior level 1 committee is reviewing every contract before we put it in place.
I appreciate that, Mr. Gorman. That's the answer I was looking for in many ways, was the evidence that you're doing this work and that it's going to actually happen, because this continued reliance creates a vulnerability. And like I said before, since 2011, almost $1 billion worth of contracts have went to shady insiders between both governments that have existed in that period of time. My last question is, what consultations have happened with the unions in light of this scandal, and what lessons learned, key lessons in particular, that you can share with the union that would actually create some confidence that, one, there will be a reduced reliance, and two, that their skills will be respected?
So this, the issue of what you're talking about, and particularly ArriveCan and information coming to light, does come up at our union management meeting. But the unions are consulted on any initiatives, including our current Traveler Modernization Initiative, our CARM initiative. So I believe there's good and frequent and open dialogue with employees and bargaining agents and representatives on an ongoing basis. But always happy to add more if the feedback is that these aren't sufficient.
Very much. Beginning our second round, Mr. Nudy, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, and through you, thank you to our witnesses for joining us here today. It appears that Mr. Ozowski was only invited back to be a contractor with CBSA after he was caught in a fib, telling the committee that he had never met with GC Strategies, yet we know that that was not the case, that he had, in fact, met with GC Strategies and Christian Firth on a Zoom call. But my question to you is, was Mr. Ozowski hired as a casual employee or as a contractor?
Casual employee.
So he was a casual employee, which means that you, as CBSA president, are responsible and accountable for his actions. Is that correct?
Yes, I signed the letter of offer.
And so the fact that you came to this committee today without the information of what information he accessed, I think is rather troubling. So I look forward to you providing this committee with all information that he accessed during his time as an employee while also being with PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Point out, there's 16,000 employees in the CBSA, so...
I'm going to stop you there. There may be 16,000 employees, but only one that you hired back who was the former president of the CBSA. So there is an increased degree of accountability there. How many consultants do...
Mr. Nair, I just want to pause you for a second, because I think you just reiterated the question that Mr. Barrett had before. This is not you're just reiterating that you're expecting the documents, but Mr. Barrett's already requested them. I just want to make, okay, that's fine. So it's clear for the witness as well for the analyst. Thank you, Mr. New. You've got 3 minutes and 50 seconds.
16,000 employees. How many consultants currently are hired by CBSA?
I can come back to that.
Well, you told us 68 have been reduced, but I want to know how many total. You don't have that number at your fingertips here? You're able to say 16,000 employees, but yet you've been asked about consultants, but you're not able to tell us the total number of consultants here today at a meeting about consultants and consulting practices?
I'm happy to come back with a list of contracts that are currently active in CBSA, but that information is also largely posted. Any contracts over $10,000, I believe, is posted on the website. So
yes,
that information
yet you're able to
should
tell
be
us
available.
68 have been reduced, but you don't tell us the total number. Mr. Ali, I'm sorry, I'm going to mispronounce your last name, but could you describe this Lansdowne Park event? Was it a dinner? Was it drinks? What was this event?
Mr. Chair, it was a evening meal, probably ended around 7 p.m.
And was there any discussion with any of the attendees about any business dealings with CBSA? Was CBSA business discussed at all?
No, Mr. Chair, it was a team event. It was discussing ArriveCan work, not any contracts. Like I said, it was a hard project to work on. We were working long hours, and it was really just socializing with team members.
Business of ArriveCan was discussed then?
I wouldn't say any financial or contractual discussions were had. It was the day-to-day grind of ArriveCan was discussed.
The Conservative Party introduced an opposition motion calling for the recollection of funds paid to contractors who did not actually no work. Ms. O'Gorman, you mentioned in response to a previous question that you were working on it. Are you recommending that any of those funds be reimbursed?
So absolutely, if we've found contractors who were paid that did no work, we will absolutely work with PSPC.
You're saying if. I want to know, have you recommended any funds be reimbursed?
Not as of yet. We're going through the material.
To whom did Fred Gaspar report when he was vice president of CBSA?
Me.
Why did he leave CBSA?
He had an opportunity at Transport Canada, and that's where he works now.
From December 2nd to December 8th, 2022, Mr. Gaspar took a trip to Bahrain. Are you aware of this trip?
I believe that was in the context of the World Customs Organization.
Are you aware if he did anything else while he was on that trip?
No?
Did he undertake any personal business while on that trip?
I don't know.
Did he attend the World Cup while on that trip?
I have no idea.
You never asked him? You never asked why inflated costs were incurred for a trip to that region of the country during the FIFA World Cup, and you didn't ask if it was perhaps because of an interest in seeing a World Cup game?
I don't... There's a WCO meeting. He would have attended as our representative. If he took extra time on his own cost to see and do something else, I don't believe that that is out of bounds. I don't know if he went to see the World Cup, and if he did, I'm not sure that that would be inappropriate.
Well, tens of thousands of dollars Canadian taxpayers might disagree. But could you
no,
provide
Mr.
us
Chair?
could you provide us with a list of all meetings that he undertook while in Bahrain?
Mr. Chair, I think it's important to not let it stand that without any evidence, and any evidence that I've seen, that somebody's accused of spending taxpayer money on personal activities. I'm not aware of that. If there's information to suggest that, I would be interested in seeing it. I am happy to furnish the meetings that Mr. Gaspar attended while he was at the WCO. If he met other people on his own time, then that's a question for him. But I have not seen anything to see that he was using taxpayer dollars to do inappropriate things. If that's the case, we will look into it. But I think it's important not to let that accusation hang out there without any further information.
Thank you, Ms. Gorman. As is my custom, you had the last word. I'm sure we'll return to this. Up next is Ms. Shanahan. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please. Pardon me. Excuse me. The clerk was trying to get my attention. Ms. Bradford, you have the floor for 5 minutes. Pardon me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For Ms. Gorman, is CBSA reviewing Diane Daly's involvement in the ArriveCAN procurement process since Christian First questioning in the House of Commons on April the 17th?
So just stepping back, as the committee's aware, there was a set of allegations put forward by a company called Bottler AI. Those allegations were examined by our Professional Integrity Division, who has undertaken various investigations relating to that. Diane Daly was involved. At this point, I don't know the status of the investigation and whether she is being investigated or whether she is a witness.
Thank you. Are there appropriate uses for subcontractors in procurement?
I'll say this. Certainly, there is a demand for companies to gather resources and take those resources and bid on contracts and furnish those resources to help departments carry out certain activities, and that is particularly common in the IT space. And there's a certain amount of overhead that's offered by those companies that the individuals either don't have the capacity or interest in doing themselves. And I believe that Public Services and Procurement is well placed to testify to that, and they have. Questions that have come up for me is when those often small companies will subcontract to multinational firms. I don't understand why that would happen. I'm not suggesting it is offside or illegal, but I do find that questionable when the value added of the companies, of the resourcing companies, is to deal with the overhead of bidding, why they would then subcontract to major firms. So I think transparency around that would be very helpful, but is it offside to subcontract? No, it's done. And again, the value added of some of these companies is to do that subcontracting, but why a two-person company would subcontract to a multinational, I don't understand that.
Okay. Now, does consulting with companies occur before a contract or RFP is issued?
So again, I'm not the contracting expert, but my understanding is that a company would gather resources and with those resources bid on a request for proposal that's put out, and they would align those resources with the type of skills that are being sought through the request for proposal.
So why was KPMG selected as a subcontractor to GC Strategies?
As I said, those are the types of questions. As I have gone through this, the material and the information that has come to light, I've had that question as well. I don't know that it is not permitted in the contracting rules. These are commercial relationships between companies, and there is one accountable company who holds the contract and is responsible for the resources that it furnishes. But again, I can understand the questions, and like I said, I've had the questions as to why why large companies would be subcontracted. Perhaps there's resources that work for both of those companies. And again, I don't have insight into those commercial relationships, but I understand that there's a lack of transparency in explaining those relationships.
And why was the CFO branch of CBSA not made aware of PSPC's recommendation to execute a non-competitive process with the second of GC Strategies contracts?
As I've testified, for some reason, CBSA had a system where if the contract was being let by PSPC, the IT group would deal directly with PSPC. That's not a best practice. That has stopped since I have come to the CBSA. Everything goes through our procurement group. They do a challenge function and they interface with PSPC. So I don't know if it was like that because it was during the pandemic and people were moving fast, or that's how it was set up, but that's not how it happens now.
Okay, Mr. Chair, how much time do I have left?
About 10 seconds, so a very quick question, please.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'll defer.
Okay.
Finished. Thank you.
Thank you. Suivant, c'est Madame Sticler-Desgagnés pour 2 minutes 30 secondes, s'il vous plaît.
2.5 minutes, Ms. Sticler-Desgagnés. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I'll continue with my questions for Mr. Leperma. Mr. Utano, during the entire contracting saga at GC Strategies, had a number of exchanges with Public Service and Procurement Canada about the nature of the contract to be awarded to GC Strategies. And you were CC'd, sir, on many of these emails. I have them here from 2020, 26th of March 2020 to the 26th of March. And Ms. Duragan from PSPC questions the use of the national security exemption, which is part and parcel of the contract. Now, you were CC'd. At any point in time, did you say to yourself, well, something's awry here with the way we are awarding non-competitive contracts that are multi-million-dollar contracts by invoking the national security exemption when these contracts are for 3 years? You were CC'd. You contributed to the conversations. Did you ever wonder about that?
Mr. Chair, I did not have any reason to think that there was anything wrong happening. My role, again, was to lead the technical development of ArriveCAN, and there was a team responsible for procurement. And I was CC'd in those emails for information purposes only.
Donc, vous êtes en train de me dire qu'un directeur par...
So you're telling me that an acting director of the CBSA didn't agree with the findings of the Auditor General, i.e. that these contracts were not properly awarded and shouldn't have been awarded in this manner. You didn't consider that there was a problem. You still don't consider there to be a problem, and you're the director of the CBSA. Does that sum up the situation quite adequately?
Mr. Chair, at the time, I was a manager reporting to Mr. Otano, who was the executive director. I did not have any procurement-related or contracting-related functions at the time.
D'accord, mais maintenant vous en avez, vous êtes directeur par...
I see, but now you do, and you're acting director. If a manager is promoted to director, they normally would have good judgment, and they should be able to sound alarm bells in such cases and say, look, I think there's a problem here. This is not proper. Public taxpayers' money shouldn't be wasted. I'd just like to remind you of something, sir, because I think it's my role to do so. Your wage at the CBSA for the past several years is paid out of the taxpayers' pockets. The money that was wasted on these contracts to the tune of millions of dollars to GC Strategies, that's taxpayers' money. It's not your money. It's not GC Strategies' money. It's taxpayers' money. So when you tell me that you were a manager and you, had no input, and now you're acting director and you still have no input, it strikes me, you're basically telling us that you don't give a damn about taxpayers' money.
Up next is Mr. Desjardins for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Who at the CBSA directed Bottler and KPMG to work with GC Strategies?
So my understanding is from some of the documents that I've seen that was from Mr. McDonald, but I'm waiting for the outcomes of an ongoing investigation, so I'm not comfortable saying that without a final assessment.
It seems to me that internal lobbying networks have largely corrupted the CBSA in this instance. Given that there's an ongoing investigation, I believe that's in some evidence an admission of at least some or partial truth to that fact. Wouldn't you agree?
I'll take issue with the corruption comment. I don't know that I've seen evidence of corruption. I've seen evidence.
Well, I can remind you of the evidence of corruption. For example, the CBSA paid $33,222 of legal bills for Mr. Cameron McDonald to prepare for a committee appearance at the Operation and Government OGO Committee to talk about his public service job. That's an annual salary for many Canadians. You know, that's a lot of money, and to put it in other ways. In this instance, that he would get so much money, according to a recent filing, that he would get $33,000 in protection from the CBSA to try to get his story straight in some ways at an Operation Government meeting, in addition to the fact that you've just admitted that there's an ongoing investigation. So I find issue with the fact that there could not be an instance where you can perceive corruption. I mentioned a fact earlier before, which was a government sponsor, or we got a government document known as Appendix B about the value of contracts between three companies, GC Strategies, Dalian, and Cordix. These three companies since 2011, pause there for a moment because this has been going on for over a decade, have siphoned over $1 billion out of the public service into these contracts, including a profit, including a network that would have enabled these people to continue to deprive the public service, but also to continue to deprive Canadian taxpayers. In addition to the fact that there's this unethical relationship between members like Mr. Autano and Mr. McDonald going to big fancy events,
Mr. Desjardins,
including wine tasting.
Your time has expired, Mr. Desjardins, so we'll have to come back to you.
I want to just, if I can just summarize that question. Is there corruption?
And I would appreciate the opportunity to answer. I sincerely take issue with the term that you're using, particularly as it relates to people where there's ongoing processes. So there's a Treasury Board policy that provides for paying legal assistance for employees. That was followed, and I don't believe that the lawyer is being used to get stories straight. I think people rightfully have sought legal advice. There's a provision for having that paid by the Treasury Board, and that was taken. So I want to be clear that I don't agree with your terminology.
Thank you very much. Mr. Barrett, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
I want to circle back to the number of consultants that you have reduced. You said the number was 68. What is the total number of consultants that CBSA is using?
So I'll have to come back. Is your question in the IT? So we've got a number of contracts across the organization that relate both to informatics, guard services, training. So we have a lot of contracts. We have been reducing our reliance on IT contracts, and I can come back with the list that we currently have.
Yeah, let's get a full list of all the contracts. You said the number that you reduced was 68, so it would be interesting to know what that reduction is from. It's important to note that, of course, CBSA officers are currently considering taking job action, and part of their grievance is excess management. So when taxpayers are also paying for more outside consultants and more outside management, that's going to impact the traveling public and commerce in Canada. I want to talk about Mr. Ossowski's access to documents when he was hired for a day to prepare for his committee appearance. As president of the CBSA, are there any documents that you don't have access to, within the CBSA?
I don't think I would have access to all of the documents from my computer, but my assumption is that I could access any of our holdings. I would.
So PricewaterhouseCoopers used to do extensive business, has historically done extensive business with the Canada Border Service Agency. Currently, you've said they're not doing any business. Mr. Osowski is recruited by PricewaterhouseCoopers from being the head of the Canada Border Service Agency. And what better way to get business with the CBSA than to hire its former president, understand its workings? Now, Mr. Osowski came back to your employ to prepare for a committee appearance, but only after he'd been caught lying. So there's an integrity question about the individual. So you hire the individual knowing that the lie's been told, and then give them access to the information that he would have had access to, you said, while he was president. Would that not be commercially valuable to PricewaterhouseCoopers to have one of their top consultants, the former head of the CBSA, get the office door unlocked and logged into the computer? And you signed his letter of offer, you said, but you seem like, to be honest, a bit laissez-faire about, unconcerned about what he accessed and who he talked to, and it doesn't seem to have occurred to you before today that perhaps there was a commercial interest with someone who had demonstrated dishonesty in front of a parliamentary committee. Does that concern you?
So, Mr. Chair, again, I'm going to take issue with the language around lying. Mr. Osowski testified to the fact that he had not recalled meeting or being in a meeting where individuals from GC Strategies were on the screen.
Ma'am, he said he wasn't in the meeting, and he was in the meeting. So by any other definition, that's a lie. So let's move on to the substance of the question. So we won't litigate whether or not he lied. I'm asserting it. You refute it. We'll accept that. Are you not concerned about at least the appearance of the circumstances that you created by hiring Mr. Osowski? It seemed like it was in his interest to get this offer of employment from you for the day, not in the interest of the CBSA. So what's the advantage to the CBSA, if not to get story straight, which you've taken issue with, that characterization? So if it was just so he could access his emails, why not pay him $1 so that he was technically employed? Why are we giving the guy $500? Seems like a good get for him for the day.
Yeah, so again, if hiring him on casual to give him access to documents to prepare for the appearance, it's in the Crown's interest that former officials come and can testify to what they did and why they did it while they were in their job, and that was the rationale for bringing him back. If he did not need to come back and could have accessed the information in the documents that, again, date back to his time as president, then that's on me, and I would happily provide that access going forward without any framework of employment around it.
Can you provide to this committee a list of all of the other occurrences where similar treatment has been offered to former employees of the CBSA with relation to their testifying before parliamentary committees during your tenure as CBSA president?
There is nobody.
So special access, it seems like special treatment for Mr. Osowski.
There haven't been retired people who are former officials invited to the committee. So the other employees who have moved departments were also given the offer to access or tell CBSA what documents they may wish to see to prepare for their own testimony.
Thank you.
The only one who was paid to prepare before.
Thank you very much.
Because the others are employees.
That is your time.
Not of CBSA.
Turn now
of the federal
to
government,
Ms.
of the Crown.
Ms. Shanahan. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you very much, Chair, and I want to thank the witnesses, especially Ms. O'Gorman, who has appeared before this committee before, who has answered all questions from members here on this very important matter of ArriveCAN, and which, of course, is being addressed in a number of other committees as well. For my part, I feel that I have really asked all the questions that I need to ask, but we have the witnesses here today, so I would like to perhaps give Ms. O'Gorman a chance to clarify any issues, any questions that she hasn't had a chance to do. Starting with this question of reimbursing former employees when they're called back in front of committee. Ms. O'Gorman, can you tell us how that works and why this is done in this way?
So I'll share my understanding of it, is that it is a practice when former officials are called to testify, as they are in litigation after they've retired, as they are at the Labor Relations Board for grievances after they've retired, and in this case, an individual was called to testify before a parliamentary committee after he had retired. It's in the Crown's interest for those individuals to come prepared, and in order to prepare, sometimes they require access to documents to refresh their memory of activities and decisions that were taken and rationale while they were doing the job. So I did put a formality around that employment to give him access to it. And as I've said, if that wasn't necessary, that's on me. It certainly wasn't an effort to enrich Mr. Osowski. It absolutely was not an effort to align any stories. He prepared the way he needed to prepare. I'm happy to to provide a list of documents he accessed, but as I said, you can ask him on Thursday.
Ms. Shanahan, I've just paused. Could you just move your microphone kind of out and down a little bit? It's just a little, that, and maybe just say a few words.
Is that better?
Is that better, Madam Clerk? Maybe say a few more words.
Yes, I'm sorry that,
it is
I
good?
may have moved it inadvertently.
I have paused.
Now?
It is, yes, thank you. I've stopped the clock. I'm going to start it. You have 2 minutes and 40 seconds, please.
Very good. Well, so Gorman, thank you for that answer. And so this policy is in place. In fact, when you say in the interest of the Crown, it is to help parliamentarians in their work with committee. Is there a time limitation? Because I understand that for ArriveCan, for example, the contractors, the subcontractors that are being question. They have been working for the Government of Canada for 13 years, including, of course, the former government under Stephen Harper. Is there a time limitation?
So I'll just be clear, there's not a policy in terms of bringing people back. The issue that I was focused on was the access to the information that he sought to prepare. And like I said, if there didn't need to be formality around that, I'll own that decision. You may wish to ask him on Thursday whether the amount he did receive was worth it. Again, this will be his, I think, third time appearing. So. Like I said, this relates to the provision of documents that he wanted to see, and the framework of the agreement goes until the end of June, but is tied to appearances before the parliamentary committee.
And I think I'm going to have to go back to previous questions that have already been asked, but perhaps you can share an update with the committee regarding the CBSA's internal investigations into the ArriveCan procurement.
So they're ongoing. People are being interviewed, as I understand it. There was a motion before the federal court to seek a stay of two of those processes. And we are waiting for the decision by the federal court, so we won't conclude on a couple of those until the federal court has ruled.
And is there anything that you can share regarding the claims of Min Don's missing emails?
Those two, that investigation remains underway. That work remains underway.
And Chair, how much time do I have?
You've got time for a 3-word question, I'd say, or thereabouts, but your time is up. But
I will leave it at that then.
All right. Turning now to our third round, Mr. Nader, you have the floor for 5.
Thank you, Chair. Has Mr. Osowski been in contact with anyone at CBSA since he was been summoned to appear before this committee on Thursday?
I recommend you ask Mr. Osowski.
No, I'm asking you as the president of CBSA. Has anyone from CBSA been in contact with Mr. Osowski in advance of his summons for this Thursday?
If he has asked for documentation, I don't know.
You don't know. Okay. We know that the RCMP has raided the home of GC Strategies founder Christian Firth. I would like to know what documentation CBSA has thus far provided to the RCMP.
I'm not tracking that. I'm not the RCMP doesn't come through me for requests of the CBSA. They don't report to me. They will conduct their investigation and they will seek the information that they feel is necessary. I'm not going to track that. It's an investigation. They are free to come and obtain any information that they feel is necessary.
Your lack of curiosity about an ongoing criminal investigation involving your department is surprising, that you're not going to track the information that is being collected or is being asked for, considering that there are quite literally criminal investigations ongoing involving employees at your department, that doesn't trigger any curiosity on your part. But I want to go back on us,
Mr. Chair?
It wasn't a question, but...
Well, but it's a statement about how I'm conducting myself. So I'm not going to ask people to report to me on whether they've been interviewed by the RCMP or what documents they've been provided. It's an investigation by the police, and I am running CBSA, but I'm not going to keep logs of what they do. They will do what they do. They don't report to me. So it's not a lack of curiosity, it's a respect for the police investigation.
You are right that the RCMP does not report to you, but the 16,000 employees that you noted do report to you, and the documents that are contained within CBSA's possession are relevant to you as president of CBSA. So the fact that you're not tracking what documents are going out from CBSA to the RCMP is surprising, frankly, because we know the challenges that CBSA has had with documentation because of the report we've had from the Auditor General, paper trails not existing, paper trails being deleted, emails being deleted. We know from Mindone's emails magically disappearing. So I want to know what you as president of the CBSA are doing to maintain the integrity of the documents within CBSA, that they are being preserved, that they're being kept intact, and so they're not magically disappearing when there is an ongoing RCMP investigation, which includes the Canada Border Services Agency. What's being done?
You know, if I asked employees to report to me on what documents they may have provided to the RCMP or interviews, I would be sitting here being accused of interfering in a police investigation. And so the RCMP has every right to come and obtain the documents it feels it needs. I don't feel the need to track that. Similarly, when the Auditor General comes in, they work with the team to get the documents they need, and nobody reports that to me. I don't interfere with that. My expectation is, and I've made that clear, that the documents that anybody in those positions, be it the Auditor General or the police, wish to seek and obtain, that they are handed over. So I don't know what you're talking about in terms of the magical disappearance of emails, but I can tell you that the RCMP is gathering the information it feels that it needs.
I can tell you which emails have magically disappeared. It was Mindone's, your former...
You don't have evidence of that.
Mr. Chair, I think it's very clear. I mean, I see you're defending Mr. Doan, and that's your right. But the fact is, this has been very well litigated in the media about emails disappearing. So I'm concerned about the integrity of the data and documents maintained at CBSA. How much time do I have, Chair?
Mr. Chair, you'll understand if I don't take media articles as factual basis to act with regard to employee conduct.
So you're saying that the story in the Globe and Mail is false?
I'm saying that we're conducting our own investigation, and you're stating that articles in the newspaper are equivalent to determined facts. So I'm saying we continue to look into it, we continue to investigate, and that's the basis upon which any action will be taken.
Thank you very much. Up next is Ms. Khalid. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I was listening to a lot of the questioning here by my conservative colleagues, and it always, it astounds me as how they never let the facts get into the way of their political jargon that they really put out there. I mean, for example, just today we heard that Bahrain was the place where the World Cup and like nefarious things happened, but actually the World Cup was in Qatar. So I'm not really sure how that really plays out with the narrative of Mr. Nader. But again, I thank you, Ms. O'Gorman, for being here today and for answering questions yet again on this important topic. And I think the sentiments of the committee are very much the same in that something happened here. Taxpayer dollars were used. We are trying to get to the bottom of what happened and how can we improve the process. And I think that your open and honest testimony here has been quite inspiring. So perhaps I'll start with asking you. I know the last time you came here, you talked about the CBSA's plan moving forward. So perhaps you can start by giving us an update as to what the plan has been as a response to the Auditor General's recommendations.
Sure, thank you. So we've made 22 commitments. I had commissioned an internal audit as well, and that's underway, and that's also informing commitments or giving rise to commitments to address some of the gaps in the processes that existed in the department. So I can group it into a few categories. One is training and guidance. It needs to be ongoing. We have I required retraining of executives and managers with delegated authority, and we continue to put out improved guidance. Quality assurance and controls, our second line of defense, as it were. I don't want to keep finding about gaps through our audits. That's an expensive way to find out that we don't have coverage and that our documentation isn't in order. Conflict of interest, I indicated that we've also done some work on that, both on the side of contractors and employees. Organizational changes. So I've mentioned a few times because it is quite significant in terms of the operations of the department, which is contracts going through one by one to a senior review committee. That's giving rise to a lot of discussions about whether we even need contracts in some cases, reprioritizing what we need to do, and then bolstering the capacity of our internal procurement team. It's increased by 20%. Credit to that team that the attrition rate has decreased to 7% from 35%. So we have a very engaged and knowledgeable team that's fanned out across the organization to support other divisions and sectors in their procurements. And then improving our information management practices. So the policy is quite clear on documents of business value. I don't think there's business value in having 18 emails back and forth versus decision documents that are clear and can be found with all of the other relevant documents, be it in a procurement file or investigation. So those are the areas that we're working across. We're more advanced. We've completed 9 of our commitments and should have the rest done in a year. But it also speaks to the culture. It's not about new rules and processes. It's about fewer priorities. It's about exposure to where we're going in terms of contracting, where we need contracts, discussions about what we can do internally. So it also is happening at the level of the culture of the organization.
Thanks very much for that. And I always wonder about the role of the procurement directorate. I mean, in a recent article, we found that the organizations or the companies that the Conservatives are really going after, trying to connect to corruption and to the Liberal government, were actually brought in by the Harper Conservative government. So 13 years ago, and have then continued the process. So perhaps you can maybe shed some light on what is the role of the procurement directorate at the CBSA, and how new is this, and how does this go beyond governments of the day, and is there actual corruption that's happening here by ministers or by the Prime Minister?
So the procurement group has always existed. It existed in a smaller form, and as I've testified, it existed in a way that they were not the point person on all of the procurements. So that's changed. And they're there to assist their colleagues who have to get their work done. And sometimes getting the work done requires outside contractors, whether it's because we don't need that skill set in an ongoing way, that we can't recruit that skill set, or that we need specialized resources for a limited period of time. So they work with their areas across the department to determine what it is that needs to be delivered, determine whether procurement is necessary, and if so, what's the best way to carry out that procurement, and obviously be a liaison with PSPC when those procurements are being
Thank you very
led
much.
by that department.
Suivant, c'est Madame Cycla-Desgagnés pour 2 minutes 30 secondes, s'il vous plaît.
Ms. Cycla-Desgagnés. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Ms. Gordon, this question is for you. We listened to your testimony. There's been a number of questions. I don't think it's a matter of which documents you'll be submitting to the RCMP. But when you appeared before the committee a number of months ago, you were very clear about the fact that your role now was to look forward, but also to tidy things up at the CBSA and ensure that ArriveCan, an event like this, an incident like this, would never occur again. And what I'm observing today, and you've heard this yourself, is that there are a number of employees of the CBSA that clearly violated the basic code of conduct, and they still hold their positions, and they've been promoted, not just Mr. Opelma and Mr. Lauzon, but others. They've had problematic conduct, to put it mildly. So there have been a couple of employees that were suspended, but apart from that, you don't seem to have tidied up shop very much.
So there's two issues. One, it's the ongoing work of the Professional Integrity Division and what they are examining based on the documents that have come forth over the course of the past couple of years. And so I have made it clear to them that I have expectations that they will deliver high quality and as fast as is reasonably possible. And so through the course of looking back, they will come to decisions and recommendations regarding what they've found. They will work with human resources colleagues who, when an investigation is completed and if it's founded, then the next step is to determine whether there's any mitigating factors and take appropriate discipline. And they have a grid that can compare discipline for various.
Thank you. Perfect. Now, could you submit the report to the committee? We know that the findings are of great interest to us because they have to do with what's occurring at the CBSA in the wake of the Auditor General's report. Could you share those findings with us and tell us when you will be sharing them with us?
So I referred to ongoing investigations, so I don't have a document or a report. I have previously expressed that these are internal examinations of employee behavior and conduct.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but I'm asking you a direct question. We and the public, taxpayers who are paying your employees' wages, want to know what's going to happen to those employees that lack judgment, that broke the rules, and that wasted taxpayers' money. Folks want to know, as president of the CBSA, how are you going to get Canadians and Quebecers those answers?
A few things there. There's the issue of hospitality, and is there a link to wasting taxpayers' money there? I'm not sure. There's a values and ethics issue at play that we will be looking at with employees who have engaged contrary to the code of conduct. But I don't, and I said previously that we are looking.
Could you please respond directly to my question? Sorry, your time has run out, but I'm just asking for an answer, Mr. Chairperson. I didn't get an answer to my question. Well, you'll have another round. But, Mr. Chair, I didn't get an answer.
For 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Utano provided oversight of a budget that he was responsible for, which was $54.5 million at the CBSA. In addition to overseeing 66 contractors, are there any internal or external reviews into the $54.5 million a year budget and the 66 contractors that Mr. Utano oversaw, especially in light of the fact that he pushed for specific contractors, including KPMG?
So, your reference to the $54 million budget, can you just tell me where that comes from?
Well, I believe it came from his operating accounts for the total amounts